Welcome back. Today we've got some absolutely mighty lore to talk about, and it's all surrounding Xal'atath because she is not what she seems. We've long known that that elf body is just that, an elf body, that Xal'atath herself is actually something else, some sort of entity from a very long time ago. We've known this stuff for a while, but it's only now that Blizzard are pushing that story forward. To get us started, here's Xal'atath's new design, right? We've seen it in the expansion, but actually look at it closely. You'll notice a gem on her head. Now let's bring in, for comparison, Locust Walker, a Void Ethereal who is Alleria's mentor. When we do that, we see an almost identical gem on his head. And then the two on Xal'atath's waist look just like those on Locust Walker's gloves. But that's actually not all. If you look at Xal'atath's arms, legs, and what she's wearing under her top, you see bandages, just like the Ethereals whose souls are literally inscribed on those bandages. These clues are intentional, and they do point us at Koresh, the homeworld of the Ethereals. But before we get into that, let's tackle the big question, one that's been looming since Legion. What is Xal'atath? Because for the longest time we thought that Xal'atath was a fifth old god, essentially one that was bested by the others and bent to their will, locked in the dagger to do their dirty work. In fact, Legion artifact weapon knowledge text supported that theory, but even then, it was always posed as just a theory. But now we actually know that that theory is false, and we know about this thanks to the curiosity of General Steelstrike. So she asked Alleria if Xal'atath was an old god, and Alleria's reply was very simple: no. Xal'atath is not an old god. Xal'atath is something else. Specifically, Xal'atath is a survivor from the depths of time. Those of you who've been around the lore scene for a few years will remember all of the whispers that used to dominate lore discussions. And over the years, so many of them have actually came true, but there is one that has not came true. So have a listen.
The fall of night reveals her true face.
This whisper is from N'Zoth, and it was during the Crucible of Storms. That was a Battle for Azeroth raid that saw us defeat Unat. Unat was basically a henchman of N'Zoth, and was a test. Basically, if we defeated Unat, we would prove our strength, and that would mean that we could go and do things that N'Zoth was counting on. We can skip the intricacies of that story, but it's worth remembering this whole storyline in patch 8.1.5 was actually Xal'atath's reintroduction to the game, where she got the body that she is currently using today. I think that's all noteworthy because of that N'Zoth whisper. It does somewhat prove his foresight, and if you haven't made the connection, don't worry, here it is. Patch 11.1.5 is named Nightfall. Now this patch takes place after patch 11.1, Undermined, which just came out. In this patch, Xal'atath is trying to have the Dark Heart repaired. That's certainly her goal anyway, and with a working Dark Heart, she'll be able to continue her plan. Now, with a whisper stating that the Fall of Night will reveal her true face, and a patch called Nightfall, it seems rather clear that we're going to find out who or what Xal'atath actually is. Again, do remember that sultry elf body with the feet that Blizzard cinematographers cannot help but point a camera at was just a body that she possessed during Battle for Azeroth. Xal'atath as an entity is almost unknowably old. We now know that she is not an old god because of Alleria, and we've got solid candidates for her identity. But first, we have to revisit her foundational lore, because it sets all of this up. The void entity known as Xal'atath, trapped in the blade of the Black Empire, was wielded by the leading priest during the Burning Legion's 4th invasion of Azeroth, and during that conflict, she whispered many, many things to the priest. We noticed that she delighted in the idea that we would be fighting the servants of the old gods, who she called her brethren. And she actually told us that of all the old gods, it was a surprise that the weakest of them would be the one to claim the ultimate prize. That was kind of funny. We thought she was talking about N'Zoth at the time, but perhaps hinting at herself. Anyway, then in the Netherlight Temple, she told us that she considers the Naru to be wayward brethren. And when she references an Altharian, she says that he was the easiest dragon aspect for them to corrupt. And all of this stuff pointed towards her being an old god, or at the very least on their side. And while we now know she isn't an old god, we do know she was around during the days of the Black Empire, a long, long time before the Titans arrived in Azeroth. But here's the crazy thing. Koresh. It's the fallen homeworld of the Ethereals, and this is far from a tinfoil hat theory, because the War Within is absolutely stuffed with evidence, all linking Xal'atath to it. If you weren't there in Legion, well, behold, this is a glorious skyscape, and it was shown to us by Star Augur Atreus, a boss of Legion's second raid, and a boss that teased the future. He showed us countless fallen worlds, both to the Legion and the Void, and here we see planets wholly consumed by the Void. But we weren't the only people at that fight. Xal'atath, trapped in the Blade, was there as well. Xal'atath observed, and looking at the skybox, Xal'atath said this:
I long for the day our masters can truly pass into this realm. You have only seen fragments, shadows, the faintest of echoes. Ask the Ethereals what one of these manifestations is capable of.
As it turns out, we didn't even have to ask them. Years later, just before the War Within, Xal'atath's gambit began. We, along with Alleria, chased Xal'atath down, and at the very end of that chase, we met up with Alleria's mentor, Locust Walker. Now, I've already covered the visual similarities at the start of this video, and the good news is there's far more evidence. We can actually push the visuals even further. As an example, the two orbs above Xal'atath's shoulders could even represent the twin sons of Koresh, the ethereal homeworld. But if Xal'atath was only on the planet of Azeroth, none of this would make sense. Why would she have all of this gear, all this get-up that references the Ethereals? Well, there's good news for that theory, because there's evidence that Xal'atath was not only on Azeroth. Locust Walker is an inherently mysterious character. We don't know all of his motivations, but he's clearly stuck close to Alleria because he understands some part of her destiny. Per him, one day she will do something massive for the Void. We don't know if it's going to be a good thing or a bad thing, or if Locust Walker is even truly our ally, but what we are pretty sure of is his extensive knowledge of Xal'atath. We get this from Locust Walker's interactions with Xal'atath toward the end of the War Within's prologue questline. So, as I'd said, Xal'atath led us in a little bit of a wild goose chase. It ended up, though, with Xal and her allies invading Telogris Rift, which is the home of the Void Elves. It's where Alleria and Locust Walker would always be camping out. We soon catch up, and there's a fight. Alleria is outmatched by Xal'atath, but just seconds before the whole thing's gonna go sour, this happens.
I can't do it!
Alleria, I see your weak heart. You cling to them still.
Begone from this place, Xal'atath!
Very well. I'll not overstay my welcome.
It may seem innocuous, but that's actually real serious. Locust Walker told Xal'atath to leave, and then she went and left. So how can he speak to her with authority? Why would Xal'atath listen to him? What's he got on her? Does she respect his power? What's really going on? We don't exactly know, but Locust Walker then went to give us two big lore dumps. So let's tackle those one by one.
Lest it consume. So it is Xal'atath who has claimed the Dark Heart. I understand now why she calls herself the Harbinger.
This is Locust Walker telling us that he's known who Xal'atath is for a long time, and the whole point of this epilogue was figuring out who the Harbinger is. When we discovered it was Xal'atath, Locust Walker was not surprised, and he understood why she called herself Harbinger. So with that in mind, let's see what he says next.
The radiant visions you spoke of are the very same my people had. Before our world was consumed by the Void Lord Dimensius.
What? You don't think... Could Xal'atath be seeking that same fate for Azeroth?
I fear that is precisely what she intends. You must find a way to stop her.
Given all we've seen since, we can still assume that that is the plan. So here, in this piece of text, our main reveal is that Koresh sang a radiant song before Dimensius manifested on the planet, which is what led to the fall of ethereal society. This was a huge reveal at the time. As far as we knew, the fate of every other Worldsoul had been accounted for. As an example, there's the Void planet destroyed by Sargeras in the Deep History. There's the defeat of Argus at the end of the Legion expansion, the various Worldsouls that awoke as Titans who we've seen, and of course, then Azeroth. This dialogue was the first time we heard of Karesh having a Worldsoul. Now, it would be strange if we didn't discover the ultimate fate of Karesh's Worldsoul during this saga. I mean, the whole point is we need to defend Azeroth. What better way to show stakes than have Karesh be involved in some way? And it's that takes us back to Xal'atath. Locust Walker speaks as if he knows her, and that is reinforced by the quest text, which reads as follows. So, she goes by Harbinger now, does she? How fitting. The way he words that makes it abundantly clear that he knows her from before, whatever that may mean. But to bring this home, there is one more lore fragment that we need to bring into the picture here. This is Voidsong's Stave of the Harbinger, and at first glance, it does seem very obvious. The flavor text reads, a gift of Dimensius bestowed at the height of the Black Empire. Putting two and two together with the title of Harbinger, this seemed obviously to be Xal'atath's stave. Now, her being Harbinger of Dimensius made a hell of a lot of sense. We actually got more hints from the Twilight Hermit, who had special dialogue for the wielder of Voidsong. He says this, do you have any idea how ancient that weapon you wield is? There was a time when the world was ruled by the Black Empire. It was beautiful. The masters bestowed gifts upon their faithful. That staff was one such instrument. It was given to the Harbinger so that one day she might, and then he cuts off. We are told that his speech is stopped by an unseen presence. We've now reached the key point of this video. The bits of lore, the fragments are introduced. The stuff with Locust Walker, what we've seen in-game, what you've just heard with Voidsong. It is now possible to craft a timeline and work out a lot more of what Xal'atath actually did and who she is. I'll begin with the first thread we need to pull on. How does Locust Walker know Xal'atath, especially if she's only been free from the blade over the last, say, 8 in-universe years? Before that, she was locked up in the blade. The most simple answer is that he met her off-screen sometime over the last 8 years, but if that was the case, she wouldn't really have played a role in the fall of Karesh, which wouldn't really tie her to all of that new Karesh lore that Blizzard just put into the game, so that doesn't seem too sensible. Now, the last time that Xal'atath would have been free from the blade, well, was some point during or before the Black Empire. We can assume over 150,000 years ago, but it's in fact so long ago that we do not have a timeline. We do, though, know that she received Voidsong as a gift from Dimensius. The Twilight Hermit tells us that Voidsong was a gift. We know it was for the Harbinger, and when Locust Walker last knew Xal'atath, she didn't hold that title. These clues, combined with Alleria's description of Xal'atath to General Steelstrike, saying that she is a survivor from the depths of time, does lead us to a kind of simple conclusion here. That Xal'atath survived the fall of Karesh. That perfectly explains how Locust Walker knows her from before, and it explains the various ethereal elements to her current outfit. And it also fits the blade kind of perfectly. So let's say Xal'atath was some form of ethereal, right? That she betrayed her kin long ago, and that as a reward she was given Voidsong. That she then traveled to Azeroth, where she would be able to work the same plan as Harbinger of Dimensius. However, the old gods of Azeroth, yes, while they're beings of the void, also clearly do have their own interests. Blizzard have foreshadowed that in-game, they've also made it clear in interviews. If Dimensius came and consumed Azeroth, that wouldn't really further the power of N'Zoth, because he'd be redundant and consumed. And that would actually place those old gods, eventually, in opposition to Xal'atath. So it's hardly a stretch to say that perhaps they betrayed her and locked her up in that dagger. Xal'atath's own dialogue actually kind of refers to something like that. She overtly says the prospect of fighting the old gods delights her and that she wants to make them pay for what they did to her long ago. So she's got beef with them, even though she and they are void creatures. And even the idea of her soul being trapped within the blade is hardly a stretch, because ethereals have got their souls magically inscribed into their bandages. That's how ethereals can hold a physical form. So I could just say, bam! Theory done. Xal'atath was an ethereal, was basically doing something bad in service of Dimensius. That happened a long time ago, ends up in Azeroth, gets betrayed, is put in the dagger, and basically fast forward to today. But there is a little bit of a twist here. Xal'atath is absurdly powerful. It's actually a stretch, but some people even speculate that Xal'atath is what's left of Karesh's Worldsoul. That may seem a bit crazy, but think about that again. We don't actually know the fate of Koresh's Worldsoul, and it would certainly add a degree of stakes to this expansion, right? Fallen Koresh, basically in the form of Xal'atath, trying to take out Azeroth, a grander Worldsoul, and for something like Xal, a grander price. But here's the thing. I love the Worldsoul theory. I also love the theory that Xal'atath is from Koresh and had involvement in its fall. But there is a little bit of a fly in the ointment, so let me explain. One line of dialogue from the Burning Crusade puts the campaign for vengeance that was waged by the Ethereum, a group of Ethereals, by Nexus King Shal'hadar at around 1,000 years ago. So, if Koresh fell while the Black Empire existed, it would have been way more than 150,000 years ago. So is it the case that Shal'hadar and the Ethereum just sat around for 150,000 years and then decided to embark on their big crusade? That would kind of be a long time to just sit about the place, right? I don't really think that works. Now, it's also the case that Blizzard could easily ignore that line. After all, it was written in 2006. But if they did stick to it, we would actually still have quite the story. We would have a story that fits the lore perfectly and still has incredible character stakes. So let me build that up to you. If Koresh fell any time between 10,000 years ago and around 270 years ago, yes, Xal'atath would have been in the Blade. But the Blade was in the possession of the Naga. Of course, the Naga do serve Queen Ashara. Queen Ashara at least was pretending to serve N'Zoth at the time. Xal'atath, of course, would later in Battle for Azeroth earn her freedom by cutting a deal with N'Zoth. So, we've got this span of time that seems to line up roughly with when Koresh did fall, at least according to the few lore fragments that we've got. And with Xal'atath clearly having history, having beef, and cutting deals with N'Zoth, well, what's to say that she didn't do something like that in the recent past and therefore played a role in the fall of Koresh? After all, there is this line from the Legion expansion. It took ages to make my return to the surface after the Sundering. The Naga can be so possessive of their artifacts. What if it's the case that the Koresh mission was one to get her freedom, right? To get away from the Naga, and what if that is how Locust Walker knows of her? And with her in this theory being contained in the dagger, it's hardly unfathomable that she manipulated a key ethereal, which then led to Koresh falling. Some people even speculate that Locust Walker could have been her wielder. That would make everything fit. So, overall, we're left with a few different options. There is clearly a strong link between Xal'atath and the Ethereals. She hints at that during the Star Augur Atreus thing. We look at the obvious visual similarities. You've got the orbs that represent the son of Koresh, you have her literally wearing bandages that look like the ethereal ones, and you've got those gems. But most importantly, we have what Locust Walker said in those voice lines and in the quest text that clearly show those characters have history and strongly imply a link between Xal'atath and Koresh. If there is a link between Xal'atath and Koresh, then it either happened roughly when we previously thought Koresh fell, which is basically within the last few thousand years, or it happened 150,000 years ago or more during the days of the Black Empire. And with those constraints in mind, this video brings together the best candidate theories of what Xal'atath actually is, what her deeper history and motivations are. I think it's pretty damn cool. Personally, if she ended up being Koresh, I think that would be metal as fuck. But here's the deal. To actually know what the rest of the Ethereals are up to, and they're up to quite a lot, you'll need to watch this video next.